Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We're your hosts, V.
And Ian, your guest host. We talk shop with other creatives and animation and comics about things like finding your artistic path or your process of making art while we doodle on Magma.
We asked people on our social medias if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts. If you haven't yet, check out our Patreon and subscribe to our channel.
And today we have with us my good friend, Jaxon Sorby. Woo! I only come on when it's my friends. So if I know you personally and we've hung out, then I'm on the show. Sorry if you guys are getting sick of my voice. Too bad. I'm back. I'm replacing Sean,
How can they
baby.
get sick of your voice? Come on.
Replacing Sean, that would be
kidding.
so funny.
No,
I feel
I
like
do know Sean as well. Like I've talked to him a few times. I haven't seen him in a while, but I used to go to those little like drawing meetups at Golden Road.
oh yeah, the
cool.
drink and draws. Yeah, those were
Yeah.
fun.
Those were great.
I had my
Mhm.
buddy Mike Green invite me to one of those, and I was
Oh,
like,
I know
that's
Mike.
so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's back in. I think he's still here now. I thought he like moved away for a little bit.
Oh, maybe. As far as I know, he's here. But yeah, we first met on Turtles, on Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at Nickelodeon,
Mm-hmm.
and I am curious because you know that show was like pretty. It was comedy, but it was action. And I think your first the gig you came from previously was more of a primetime show, right?
Yes, it was for sure. I had come from a show called Conquest with Titmouse that got canceled. But before
Oh
that,
yeah,
I was on
I know a lot of people on that.
Little Demon,
Oh
and then
yeah.
before that, I was on Mulligan. So a bunch of those shows were a lot of adult primetime kind of shows,
How
and which I was very happy to be on.
How did you like? How did that? Well, we don't have to get into it, but I just thought that was interesting, like that adjustment,
Mhm.
jumping from primetime to a more dynamic cinematic style. But before we get into that, I always do this. This is my thing.
Uh-huh.
So don't listen to any episodes I'm on back to back because you'll see I ask the exact same questions. But I always like to know your history with art. Like, where did it start for you? Did you always like to draw? Were you the kid who was always doodling?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what was your journey here?
So I think I've always been sort of in that art has always been my like thing. I think a lot of kids have that experience, but just as a sort of distinguishing factor, I think in some ways my mom kind of mythologized a lot of things for me. And what I mean by that is like when I was in preschool, she would tell me the story about how I was really obsessed with dinosaurs. And for, I think I was 3 or 4, had drawn like a series of different dinosaurs. And I could tell her, hey, this one's this one, and like tell you the Latin name and like what it
Oh.
meant and all that stuff. And so I I don't know if that was the thing that sort of propelled me forward, but I think I was just like very observant, and so I just wanted to draw. And
And what age was this?
well, like that was when I was like 3 or 4. I was in preschool.
Ah.
But when I was in I think third grade, second or third grade, I think we had one of those like draw your family things on
Mm.
at a elementary school, and so I did a photo of my brother and me. And I think a lot of people, when they think about like kids drawings, they think of it sort of as like it's gonna be like a stick figure, right?
Mhm.
I I don't know if this is just how my brain worked, but I had this very difficult angle where it was like I was looking down on my at my brother, and he was like a baby wrapped in a swaddled in a blanket, and
Oh.
I drew exactly that. Like I had the face and I just drew the shapes of me looking down with my cheeks, my like all of my eyelashes, and you could tell photo to picture, I was
Ooh.
like copying one to one. Uh,
Wow. Hmm.
and I no one told me how to do that. I just did it.
Oh, interesting. So
Um,
you were a natural talent.
I've never been a fan of that whole idea of the natural talent, but I think
Yes.
it's
Me too, me either. I love to tease people though and say
yeah, I was
that.
born to be an artist. No, it's
That's hard
I
work.
think that's what made sense of like no, that's what you do if you wanted to like draw something. Um, it was to
Hmm.
sort of like copy what you saw. Um,
Interesting.
so speaking of which, like I've got like lead the eel off to the side, given the drawing prompt.
Oh, I forget. Yeah, I got to remember how to draw Lee. I got to go back.
Um, but you know, I did that stuff, and then like I think that sort of it's. I grew up being very distinguished as like, oh, I can draw. My mom like tells me I can draw. Um,
Hmm.
and so you know, it sort of is this self-fulfilling prophecy where you like that's the thing that you build your ego around, and then you
Hmm.
continue to do it. You know,
But you
um,
didn't go to art school. Is
I
that
did
correct?
no. I actually was like thinking about like being like a vet or like a something in as like a forest ranger or something like
Oh,
that.
interesting. I didn't know
Ooh,
that.
that's cool.
I actually like was sort of I really had these moments where I like would talk to my parents. I was like, I don't know what I really want to do. I'm kind of like deciding, uh,
Hmm.
and it being sort of a point of contention. But I
As it
didn't
is
go
with
to
parents.
you know how it is. But you know, it was I uh I didn't go to art school partly because I didn't really know the options available to
Hmm.
me. I just sort
Yeah.
of gone through high school and I was struggling there with ADHD. And
Hmm.
so when I graduated, I was like, oh right, you gotta do something afterwards. And my parents didn't talk to me about what I have to do. So I think partly it was they never got a lot of help. And so they sort of was expecting me to kind of figure out the answers. Uh,
Hmm.
and so I went to community college for a little bit. I was like, that seems smart.
What did you study in community college?
I eventually settled on psychology. And the reason why was partly it sort of becoming like my family's therapist a little bit. But
Ah,
um,
ah.
I had, you know, an interest in psychology and
Hmm.
I thought out of all the other sort of majors that they offered there, because there wasn't really a film related one, I figured maybe I'll understand how like people work and then that'll like help me write or something.
Hmm.
So decided to basically like study that while I was working on a portfolio to try to get into art school. And then when I was in my third year, I was trying to get my prerequisites out of the way. I tried to apply to a bunch of art schools, but I didn't really know a whole lot of what I was doing. Um, and I think in hindsight, it probably worked out better this work. I didn't get anywhere, but I tried to apply to some places, and I think I was very bold about being like, "Oh, I'm just gonna apply to CalArts and like get in there, and I don't want need like a secondary school."
Hmm.
And when I did apply to CalArts, I you know I made my portfolio, I did everything, and I forgot to pay the admission fee or the application fee.
That's so
Ah,
crazy.
So
I
I did all
also
of
had
that.
a one school option. I just applied to SVA, and I was like,
Right.
we either do it or we don't. And I got it, so I was like, all right, this is my life now.
Yeah, but that worked out, you
Hmm.
know? I feel like
It worked
SE is a
out.
great school. So,
Oh,
um,
that's
but
cool.
yeah, I speaking of SVA though, my mom went to SVA.
Oh
So,
yeah.
uh, she I kind of came from like a bit of a family of artists. So which was kind of surprising that no one said anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe they were
but
like, don't go, don't get.
Yeah.
well, it
You'll
wasn't even
regret it.
that. It wasn't the only one who was giving me that messaging was my dad, who was like, I was an artist and now I want to be a business person. But when it comes to I applied, didn't get in, and then afterwards I was sort of like 3 years into a degree. and just sort of felt like I needed to. It made not a lot of sense to sort of like try again and then like sort of not finish.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'll finish this psych degree and then I'll go to art school. So it
Mhm.
was always the plan to go to art school, but I kept finding roadblocks, and I don't know. Maybe things just
So,
worked out better that way.
But
no, I
you
think
did.
so.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about your story is that you still ended in animation and you didn't go to art school. So I want to hear a little bit about your like when you graduated with a psychology degree.
Yeah.
How did you apply? What was the thought process for you? Like how did you find your first job? What was that moment like?
Good
Let's
question.
see. It's kind of a weird, non-traditional journey, which I'm sure you guys love. I
Mm-hmm.
listen to this pod, so I've heard a lot of people talk about their journeys. No, I got my first gig in 2020, like during the height of the pandemic. Um, but before that, out of my second degree at school, my last year I had an art minor, so I was taking a few art classes to try to make it easy finish. And I ended up taking this animation class, all the animation classes, because I found out there actually was a film school at the university that I transferred to. Um,
Oh,
but I didn't want to transfer into it because it meant that I would have to start all over again. They had like this sort of program where like you have to start from year one. Um, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna do that. I'm trying to get out to LA.
right.
But yeah, so I'd worked for or sorry, not worked for. I was taking this class, tried to every class I could on the subject. And then I was doing 2D in a 3D class. This will get back to your question, by the way. Um, but I was doing all this stuff. I worked with my professor who I was like, hey, can I like take an independent study? He was like, that sounds fine. And then he hired me at Northrop Grumman. So that became my first job in as an artist. And so from there, I went from having worked as an artist to moving out to LA from Albuquerque, which I never mentioned. I should have mentioned that I'm from Albuquerque. And then sort of like winging it. There's a lot of steps that happen the sort of in between, but the first job I got was with Mulligan, and not Mulligan, it was actually Bless the Hearts,
Oh, I
because I
remember
had
Bless the
a
Hearts.
friend who was a director who recently became a director, and I guess the show was a little bit on fire,
Oh yeah.
and they had like lost a couple of artists, and so they were like, "Hey, I know you can draw. This could be your opportunity to sort of like hop in." And I got my first opportunity there, and it was amazing. Honestly, I was like, "Holy crap, I did it! I made it
Yeah.
in and
Yeah.
around the like long way of having to go to school." It was just
How did
portfolio
you
was pretty
meet that
good.
friend? How did you guys know each other?
Oh boy, I guess Clem, get ready. But
Mm-hmm.
I I did stuff where I this is going to tangent a little bit. So when I moved here, I had to kind of start from ground zero, and so I was working a lot of survival jobs, kind of like working construction, and I was trying to find a way to like meet people out here, and I also had like a strong interest in more folklore, mythology related kind of stuff.
Mm.
And so I wanted to try to find a group that I could like meet up with and talk about like just a vast variety of sort of obscure topics. Just find like minded people. And I tried a bunch of things like was it the meetups and not Groupon, but yeah, just kind of like online groups, and I couldn't find anything. And I
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
wandered into a shop in Burbank, and I met someone who was telling me that they had a sort of like witch group to
So
kind of join a
cool.
coven.
Ooh.
And I really like the coven was really cool. I joined this thing, and I felt like I met a lot of like-minded people, and it was like really fun to be able to like talk about. Oh yes, this. like a lot of times it was like, hey, this holiday of Ostara is like based around this Germanic goddess, like was it Oster? Um, like the
Mm.
goddess of like the dawn, and
Mhm.
like she had a lot of like fecundity symbolism, like fertility kind of things, like rabbits and eggs, and
Mhm.
then that just kind of like got taken over by like Christianity. But just like I don't know, that was stuff like that was like, yeah, I have this piece of information, this trivia that I can't use, and it was so nice to be like someone else being like, oh yeah, yeah, same hat, yeah, same.
Do
Mhm.
you
Uh,
link that your interest in like folklore and other stuff like that like to your like creativity like did
yeah,
you always like this stuff? Because I'm interested like if those were two separate things or if you were you drawing like I mean it seems like they sort of like would naturally come together
they
at
definitely
some
do.
point, which is interesting.
Even in sort of like the going from dinosaurs and
Mhm.
having the sort of like even like the Latin names, just the etymology of how they work
Yeah.
is just fascinating. So it's one of those things where when you start to like piece together like pieces of folklore and sort of like the origins of it, it kind of scratches different parts of your brain because you sort of start relating a lot of different things to one
Mm.
another,
Mhm.
and then it's kind of has an alchemy of ideas. You get this kind of wag bag of, oh, like there's this mythology that has this, and like this mythology that has this very similar thing. Wonder what it would look like to see those things mashed up, or just sort of like learning generally about like history, or I don't know, like
Yeah.
again, etymology or food or whatever, just like understanding the world a little bit better, all is sort of like scratching those kind of creative parts of my brain.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I think I'm very much a world builder at heart.
A hundred
And so
percent. From
it's
your
just,
work, I would definitely say that.
yeah, thank you. But it's just that's kind of what I'm like always drawn to. And especially with the witch group was kind of like I like that part of it.
Do you feel like hanging out with the witch group, like you met people who were also in animation, or like
Yeah, yeah.
and the reason why I asked is that I was wondering if that is a way that you met people that eventually because you did say that you went to the drink and draw, which was like that one was like 100% like animation networking. It was all animation people hanging out.
Yeah.
I didn't really look at it like that. I just was looking for friends, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you were looking for friendship first, not so much for a job.
I mean, that would have been a nice benefit, but I kind of knew that was like, no one wants to come into animation being like, give me a job, please, you know?
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I was never like
I have no
interested.
real friends, only networking. No.
It's just,
Yeah.
I think that like having I think when you kind of come at it from, I care about this person first, and
Hmm.
it's not just like my meal ticket, I think you're more invested in some
Right.
ways.
People want to help you more when
Yeah,
you're just a good hang. Yeah, note to future people trying who want to work in the industry, just be cool.
Just be cool.
basically.
Just be a good hang.
It should be a good hang.
It seriously feels like that's what it is. It's like it's how can you keep a conversation? Are you like fun to sort of like be with? All those things are definitely like true. It seems like everyone that I've met has been awesome. So
Yeah.
that's how you stay around in this field.
Sorry. I got you off track, but like through that witch group,
Yeah.
you were able to meet someone so they that recommended you for your first gig.
Yes.
That's cool.
So
It is so cool and interesting to like, go through. I don't know, you can I guess that's what it means when people are like, "Oh, you have to move to LA," because you can just meet people in the most random ways in LA.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was like not animation specific. It was like,
Hmm.
no, I just think this thing is cool, and then you think it's cool, and we could talk about it. Again, it's like the cool hang.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Um,
You were a cool
so
hang.
yeah, I guess that's the way to do it.
How did you make up your mind about moving to LA? Because you were in Albuquerque for a while, and wasn't
Yeah,
that the job that you were doing where you were like, you were drawing, right? You were drawing.
I was. Yeah.
Can you tell
Um,
us a little bit about that gig?
yeah. So, kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but I was saying I worked kind of through my professor. My professor Brad Swartzen was the one who was sort of like brought me on and gave me that like first opportunity. And part of the reason why was I think I mentioned earlier that like that class was like a 3D class. It was like everyone was teaching he was teaching Maya. And I wanted to come in basically being like, I want to do 2D. So I'm going to take all of your like principles and I'm going to do it in 2D. And
Hmm.
so I was like one of the few 2D artists in that class. And so when I expressed interest to sort of like do more of it, because I was trying to like build my own art program because I couldn't go,
Mm-hmm.
just give myself like projects or opportunities to sort of do those things. He saw it and was like, oh, like we need a 2D artist for this project. Let's bring him on. He seems like a go-getter. So I was like, okay, sweet. So yeah, he brought me on and I worked for Northrop Grumman and there was an office in Albuquerque who their whole thing was sort of like doing all the technical stuff, sort of more in the computer or like support kind of related things in terms of the visual multimedia kind of things. Like there was training. The project that I first did was a commercial for the CDC, which was very cool. I don't know if it aired anywhere, but it was really nice to be able to like, oh yeah, I've got to do this thing. It's pretty much single-handedly. Like they were I in hindsight it was like, oh, I really should have done this in a different program. I didn't have any real training or experience.
Mm.
But I did it in Sketchbook or yeah, Sketchbook Pro, I think.
A full animated ad?
Yeah, it was to like let people know about this update for like software that can a bunch of different healthcare services kind of use
Hmm.
as like an way of updating sort of what the CDC was going to put out. This is years ago, so like I think it's declassified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's CDC. It's not going to be
Declassified.
anything crazy. But then after that, I was doing a couple. They kept me on for a couple other projects as well. And one of the things I did was this project that was involving members of the military. Essentially, the best way to talk about it is almost like a sim. So I don't want to say dating sim, but it was kind of like they would have a picture of a character, right? As a
Mm-hmm.
soldier. And I did all those assets. And then they would sort of have like a happy expression, a like upset expression or whatever. And you would
Mm-hmm.
go through and talk to different members and sort of like do the training that way through sort of a
So
interaction sim.
Interesting.
almost like an HR kind of thing, right?
A little bit, yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
specifically through like I think Army, but
Mm-hmm.
that was it. Like again, I don't think that's anything that's too over the top.
Because
But
it's kind of like corporate assets, kind of. I guess it's like just internal communication. So it's not like, yeah, that feels pretty tame. Not very secret.
Yeah.
yeah,
Was that a how did you find that work? Were you like just happy to be doing something that was uh like creative in a way or drawing, or were you like was
yeah.
it a reality check where you're like, oh, drawing's a job?
No, I was super on board with the whole drawing as a job
Nice.
thing. I mean, the thing was too is that like I said that I was coming from like a family of artists, so like these things were not like a wake up call. It was sort of like no, it's work. It's not just fun.
hmm Oh yeah, because you saw them working on like art, especially your dad, who like then moved to business. Like you've seen what art could look like as a job before.
Not so much my dad, but my stepdad
Oh yeah.
was
Mm.
very much the case. He went to art center, and then he also was working at Autodesk, or I guess he still works at Autodesk.
Oh, it's
So
crazy.
I was very aware of like the entertainment industry, or like just in general having sort of entertainment as a job, like seeing things behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom also worked at Sony ImageWorks. She was like she had started as like a temp worker at a different company called Alias, and then sort of like used that experience within entertainment because this was like a small um, visual effects studio to get into Sony. So I got to come on to the Sony lot a few times, the Sony ImageWorks, which I guess is now Sony Animation.
That's
Uh,
so crazy. Wow.
but I got to see that behind the scenes, and so there was a lot of stuff of like, oh, this is a job. Like you see that,
Hmm.
and like you meet a lot of these cool people who are like, there's lighting, and there's like people who are cutting like film at the time. There's like incidentals and a bunch of different things. I saw Spider-Man 2 dailies. I saw Zathura stuff and
Oh
the Polar
wow.
Express. Uh,
Wow. That's crazy.
yeah, so like it was really cool to see all that stuff because I lived in LA for a little bit,
Okay.
kind of where I was born. But they knowing that existed was kind of like easy to kind of be like, oh yeah, I take this seriously and I'm gonna like really work at it to sort of get into a place where I can do this for a living.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
no, I was happy that I was getting to do it as a living. The only thing was when it came to Northrop was that after a little bit the programs kind of ran out.
Mm.
So they had kind of a stint of a lot of different sort of art related uh, jobs. Like they had a lot of contracts that sort of had a tangential relationship to having some sort of like art assets. And
Mhm.
so because of that, they kind of just didn't have as much work for me after the first year. And I
Ah.
was kind of banking on like like I can work at this and save up money so I move out to LA because I want to be working in animation. I know that's where I need to go, but there wasn't really like a way to keep a savings because the work was starting to run out.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
I was like trying to do everything to stay there and figure out how to like make my next game plan. And so I was like, doing training. I was teaching myself software to like be helpful, try to find ways to find work.
Mhm.
And so like I was doing everything from learning like Premiere so I could help with like video editing like
Mhm.
stuff or adding subtitles to like in-house kind of stuff. Eventually I was starting to kind of do like stuff that you would associate with an intern. So I was like, filling up waters and sitting at the front desk as a temp person, kind of checking in if someone needed me to run out or move something from the storage room. It was kind of those kind of things. And I was like,
Mhm.
this does not seem like it's sustainable. I kind of need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of cut my losses with the savings that I did have, and I was like, I gotta come out here. Um, so yeah, I moved out here, and after that,
Well, you kind of, you got to like take the plunge, Like
yeah,
I think most people like I always say you cut out like 90% of your competition just by making the move and
right.
coming out here because most people it's hard to like work up the nerve to move to a new location and try to do the thing.
Oh yeah,
I mean, maybe that's changed now due to everything being online, but I was the same way. I like, you know,
you're coming from Ohio though, right?
yeah, came from Ohio and just was like, all right, well, let's try it. And V came from France.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I came here when I already had a gig because because when you're international and with the visas and everything,
Right.
yeah.
I personally would not recommend somebody international to come out here without,
Securing something.
yes, just because of the visa.
Yeah.
It's so hard in LA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you can't just like get a job when you're like international. But I do think it's like really cool to hear that like you came out here and you're like, okay, I'm gonna try to make it work. We have a great question actually from Instagram. Peppermint Gentleman asks, what do you
Yeah.
think has been the driving force for you staying in this field? And the reason why I'm asking this right now is kind of like reacting from what you were just saying that like it's a field that is built on a lot of like failure and just trying things and things don't work out and sometimes it can be kind of hard like after a while working in the boards, getting a million notes, getting just kind of like jaded with the, you know, the general landscape and just the feeling of like, wow, like no matter how far you are in your career, you still get notes, you know?
Yeah.
What has been that driving force for you staying in that field?
Also, real quick, thank you for your service. I know that Stephen will get it. So, I feel like it's a number of things. One, it's also like on a semi-humorous level, it is feels like the one thing I can do really well.
Mhm.
Um, but also like I don't know, I love this craft and I love the people. I think that's always the big thing, is that like I love the problem solving of it,
Mhm.
and it never feels like it's that discouraging to get notes. Like it's always in moments to like learn.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that's sort of the gift of working in a field where you're constantly like having to chase perfection.
Mhm.
Um, is sort of like getting these moments where you're like constantly sizing up like where you're at because of like what the show wants, or like uh just being kind of squeeze, whether it's like time limits or uh styles or whatever. Like I think we were kind of tangenting a little bit in terms of the question about like prime time to
Mhm.
action, and like that
Very
was
cinematic action too.
yeah, and that was like a huge leap. I was like I enjoy Turtles a lot. That's like a, a really fun show. I was so happy to be on that. But like I was kind of treading water because I was like, I'm not used to this. I don't know what my pipeline is in terms of like getting this on time and like uh just trying to make things feel punchy is
Yeah.
very tricky. You guys make it look so easy. But like I was like, oh, this is like it's not a bad thing. It's like, okay, well, how can I find my skill set or whatever? How can I like
Mhm.
solve that need right now of, how do you become a good action person, or how do you like, I mean, I don't know, even construction or whatever. Like it just there's always a way to solve the problem. You always can figure it out.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I think staying in this field, it's kind of a little bit of a maybe it's a climber in me, but I think that I like just a little bit of masochism and a little bit of like problem
Now
solving.
we're talking literal
Mhm.
climber, by the way, not like a
Yeah.
social climber,
No, no, no,
but
definitely
a
not
but a
that.
man who likes to climb and to attach themselves to a wall.
No.
Yeah.
The puzzle of rock climbing.
It's a real puzzle.
So I don't know. I love that part of it. It's cool to be in this field. This feels very like I feel very privileged to even be part of the thing that like can reach so many people, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It feels important work.
I yeah, it was really cool when we were working on Turtles, and it was all like pretty much remote. I don't think people really were going in very often. But then slowly, I think it was just you, me, and like Perry, our PA, were like coming in pretty regularly. And those little moments when we got to like we'd like hang out, talk a little bit, show each other what we were working on, and just like that. I don't know. Those little exchanges were like so much fun.
Yeah.
That's sort of what like I know we can do this job like super remote, but I don't know. Yeah, that like, little camaraderie that you kind of build. It's
Hmm.
uh, it's great.
I do think there is something to be said about like how working, because I feel like I have not worked in office or barely since the pandemic. The couple of shows where we started coming in, we got canceled like almost like right away. So it's
R.I.P.
it RIP. There like it is definitely really bizarre working on shows without like seeing anybody and not being able to build that same sense of yeah, like camaraderie, like you were saying, Ian.
Yeah, I do. I do kind of. Yeah, I do. I think it's. I'm a fan of the hybrid model. That's all I'm gonna say.
A fan of what?
Of the
I feel like
hybrid
it's
model.
nice.
Oh,
I
the
don't want to go in
hybrid.
all
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
time. I don't want to go in
Mm,
all the time, but I do
I
like
felt
going
like
to lunch with people.
I because I was also coming in from like the pandemic, I never really got that strong like sense of in office work until Turtles.
Mm.
And so it was like, yeah, this is what I was waiting for. This is what I wanted, you know? Because I think I was very enamored with, especially watching those like, you know, behind the scenes things at like Pixar or whatever.
Yeah.
Being like, oh yeah, storyboarding is so nice because like you actually have like ways of talking with people and like interacting. And then I got in and it was like, nah, you just kind of sit at your job. Just like be at your desk alone and maybe talk with your director online in a Zoom call. I think it was just like the timing of it all, but like it was like, ah, man, like I love the fact that I get any little semblance of, yeah, this is pretty good. I get to talk with my director every day, and we can go over, hey, does this look good? Do you like it? Change this? Oh, it's a great idea, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think when I got to Turtles, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is what I wanted. I love that aspect of collaboration. It's like the what makes animation specifically like really interesting to me.
Mm.
Maybe just because like I maybe never really considered the career path of a comic artist before. I guess until
It's very
recently.
solitary.
But then even then, it's like it's pretty solitary. So there's not a whole lot of like art related jobs that are like built around a social quality. And I think especially here where it's like normally what you're doing with your work is trying to make things look cool so you're getting that like sense of awe, or you're trying to like make someone like laugh or feel something. It's you get that very like clear sense of a is this working, is it not? Like you're getting that reaction, you know?
Yeah. No, it's cool to get that visceral reaction. Like something's working. It's like, ooh, okay, this would be
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah. So our patron Puzzle Glum asks, do you think your skills in storyboarding and comics have helped you learn game dev or vice versa? I think that's a good way to kind of start talking because I have seen your comics, which are like very impressive, by the way.
Thank you.
Really great sense of pacing and uh you're also like a really strong like draftsman in terms of like anatomy and stuff. I'm always just kind of like on the floor, like, wow, I can't believe you didn't go to art school and you can like draw these like bodies and like perspective and stuff.
I mean, I also like I see you draw, and I'm like, yeah, you're doing all these cool things in with your anatomy and like playing with you know dynamic proportions and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I think a lot of times though, I look at other people's art and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to try that, and I'll
Hmm.
try to find ways to learn something from that, at least challenge myself. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, game dev. Like, what
And
are your, yeah, because you're doing so for people listening, Jackson's working on an idea and but it has you've explored it in comics form and you've explored it in game form.
yeah.
What's your kind of overall idea? Like, what's your overall thought or process and how did you want this idea to take form?
Good question. I will say that the reason why I did it as a comic, the reason why I did it as a game was because I was trying to figure out how do I want to do this. I was kind of thinking that there was ample opportunity for both it being either medium, but I wanted to sort of test out even just my own sort of feeling of how does this process make me feel? Do I like this?
Mm.
Um, is this something I would want to continue to return to? Because I've known that over the years, what seems to motivate me on sort of like bringing it back to the whole like trying things that are new or aren't really scary is I'm very motivated by experimentation. So
Mm. Yeah.
I think I tend to be like, oh, let's just throw myself into this, and I think that I get like a kick out of like seeing something work.
Same.
But like sometimes it's not enough by itself to be like, okay, I'm happy with this. I'll do it again. Like I'm usually like, okay, that was fun. I don't have to do this again.
Ah,
Not that I'm like don't like it, but just I feel like it usually isn't grabbing that same like part of me to be like, I need to do this all day, every day, all the time. I kind of just like mostly want to see if I can do it.
Hmm.
And I think that was the motivator. But with the comic, the story that I'm working on, uh, because I was like, it could work for a game, it could work for a comic, and also like largely being very inspired by stuff like in Homestuck.
Hmm.
I was very like, ooh, like I love multimedia stuff. I love even just like
Yeah.
when a show becomes a game
Hmm.
or a game becomes a show, etc. Like sometimes the medium doesn't always support it, you know?
Hmm.
It's kind of dependent on the strengths of the medium. I kind of was like, well, this right now feels like it could go either direction. So what feels the best? And I will come back to the game. I will, but I think I'm a little obsessed with these characters, and I wanted to see how can I bring them to life in different mediums and sort of like just try something. So
Yeah. Now that you bring up Homestuck, I can see it, like where you're like you have your little walk around with your character.
yes, very much the case.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God, that's funny. I started reading Homestuck very recently. I would say like a couple months ago. Because I
I'm
was
so
like,
sorry.
I'm so sorry. Okay, why are you sorry?
I think it's just the general like feeling that a lot of people who like grew up either reading it or
Why?
having
Because
to
you're
see it.
obsessed. You've been trapped by it.
Yeah,
It's taken.
yeah.
It's going to take over.
Hopefully,
Oh, that's so funny that you would. I do think there's a lot of cool stuff about Homestuck.
oh yeah.
Probably not the content of it, probably not the story of Homestuck, but I definitely think it having. I definitely think it's really cool that it's something that can only exist online and that you have all these different pieces of media. And I think it's so cool that you are doing both comics and I was just kind of wondering if you would kind of like alternate or like if you're gonna put together a little package for your story where it's like sometimes comics, sometimes a walkthrough, sometimes a game, or if it's like
That'd be
Definitely
cool.
that. That's the idea because I feel like it just I think it sets it apart a little bit. I think that stuff is cool, so I'm gonna want to make something that's cool, that kind of thing of make the thing that you would want to read. But also I think the strength of the medium of games is fun because you have to interact with it, and so you're more engaged as a viewer.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Whereas I think, and especially like if you have like mile markers or things that are in the way, you're like, in order for me to continue getting like some level of satisfaction out of this, I have to figure it out. And so you are very present in it. But with comics and in some ways animation, no, animation is different. But I feel like when it comes to comics, you are the one who's setting the pace. You're the one who's
Yes.
showing as much interest into it. So
Hmm.
you are like, there's a strength to the medium in that, in terms of being able to sort of pick things apart or sort of read your own interpretation or even just sort of like feeling the speed of things. Because it's like the thing about like comics is that you're really, because it's not, there's degrees of separation of reality. You are sort of like bringing your own perspective, your own, like you're projecting into it, and you're sort of filling in a lot of these gaps that are not, what do you call it, like explicitly present in it. So whether it was like a slice of life comic where a character is doing something that feels really relatable, like you're putting a lot of it into it, and especially characters that are like really simplified or whatever, like there's a lot of stuff that's doing there on a reader level, but also like in terms of one thing I'm looking at right now is I really like some of the YA novels that I grew up reading. There's like a lot of maps, for
Oh
instance,
yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
and I'm like,
I could see the links with your work.
yeah. But like there was something I was talking to Ty Goodwin. I
Oh
don't remember
yeah.
which episode he was on.
Oh, let me bring that up real
Yeah,
fast. Everybody listening, Ty Goodwin episode. It's a great episode. It's one of my favorites.
he's got a good recording voice.
Hmm. 189, episode
Yeah.
189.
I thought I was your favorite episode. Jeez.
Sorry, this is how you find out, Ian.
It's all right. I'm fine. I'm just kidding.
This is the
But
beef.
that's great. He's
We
really
just
like
like
so
start
thoughtful.
a creative blog. We just start like a low key beef between the guest hosts, and
Oh
I pitch
yeah.
you all against each other. Yeah. So you were talking about maps and like talking to Ty about like novels and stuff. Way novels.
Yeah, so like I think the there's the strength of the medium there of like I remember just like poring over like Spiderwick Chronicles, or like
Oh,
even the
classic.
Warrior Cats series. Or there's like so many books out there that I remember reading being like, oh, it's so fun to like look at all the maps because there's like so much detail in there, and then you just like look at the page for like ever.
Mhm.
Or heck, even like maybe I'm just I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but I would sit and like read a strategy guide for Pokemon just because I love the art. And
Oh,
they
I
would
do
have
that.
sort of arts of like, the maps, And
Mhm.
I just love looking at like all the little details that they have into it. And it's like having a piece of art in your house, but just like you pull it out in a book and you can just like stare and really absorb everything.
Mhm.
And there's that aspect of like a still piece of art that's really cool. And then also similar in that same vein, because I'm thinking about this in terms of like I would want to use that sort of mappy, sort of like just kind of interpretive still image in the same way that something like even Gravity Falls does it, where you throw in like a bunch of puzzles in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so you have
Mm,
people sort of like use this text as like a clue.
Mhm.
that's
And
cool.
like sort
Yeah.
of as they're reading and getting more information, they're like, oh, that's related back to this other page. And you go back to the first, volume or whatever. That's like the
That.
strength, I think, of comics is when you see,
Mm.
or even just like just media when it's that still image of like seeing sort of a sequential piece of art have meaning and then going back and being like, oh, it's here, or like look at how far the person's come, and you like have like callback panels or whatever,
Yeah, what
um
you're describing is very Homestuck.
yeah,
It's very like how things kind of like that dialogue between like new little clues and new little things that you can disseminate. That's
yeah.
very cool. I do think it's really interesting that you bring that up because I definitely feel like we are in a new era of content, and I think I know some people hate the word content, but I'm sorry, I'm gonna use it. Just because I feel like, and I don't know what you guys are thinking about that thought I'm gonna say, but comics is linear usually. Animation, films, very linear most of the time.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the modern audience is getting a little just kind of like tired of that, how
Well,
linear these kind of quote unquote old mediums are.
well, I saw a really interesting video that talked exactly about what you're saying, V,
Mm,
where they're saying that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are because Hollywood like it has this like 80s nostalgia obsession and it's just trying to like cater to like millennial
mhm,
nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's sort of neglected like stories and mediums and characters that sort of resonate more with like a younger generation. So
mhm,
there's a big fall off of like Gen Z or younger generations being interested in long form like movies and stuff.
mhm.
And they find like most of their stuff on like YouTube and TikTok and whatever. I mean, that sounds so like I sound like an old man, but I'm like I also kind of agree because I'm also like I'm like yeah I watch YouTube. I like watching
Oh
weird
yeah.
obscure YouTube documentaries. I like weird
Animated.
cartoons on there. There's just like weird like independent anime I just saw where it's like these soldiers who are like little girls going through an office and killing like the Thing style monsters, and it's super gory and it's fucking
Oh,
crazy.
I
And
need to see
I wish I
that.
could remember it. If I can remember it,
Mhm.
we'll do an addendum at the end or something, and
Yeah.
I'll find it and I'll post it. But it's awesome, and it's like yeah, there's I think animation and all this like people still like linear stories, but like I don't think Hollywood is finding them and allowing them to they're kind of just like oh well this is too obscure, we need to be more broad with our audience, and I think
We're
that
getting very
audience
new.
is moving on, and they should
Mhm.
they like anime, they like weird stuff. I like weird stuff. I mean, I'm into it. I'm
Mhm.
hip. I'm cool.
Yeah.
I'm not an aging millennial. Just saying. It's fine.
We all are.
But yeah, I see their point.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's an interesting future.
Well, yeah, and I think it's cool to kind of play around with all the different mediums
Mm-hmm.
in that way.
No, I agree too, though. Like, I also just think that part of those the appeal of stuff that people find like on YouTube or like the obscure stuff is just because it's being made. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people usually are pretty much like, if someone's just continuing to do something, people are usually like, oh yeah, like it's this guy. Like, that's kind of cool. I really enjoy this stuff. I feel like even just in terms of the stuff that inspired a lot of people, like especially like my age, I'm 30, people who were like either getting into the industry or like my generation, we kind of got spoiled with a lot of stories because people weren't really paying attention to animation. Like
Mm-hmm.
they there's so many stories that were out there because it felt very like this medium where at least the companies didn't really take it seriously as this huge investment thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then once there was a few people started paying attention, I guess like when things started breaking, like box office
Mm-hmm.
stuff, I think animation sort of like became this thing of, oh, we need to appeal to everyone because this is a moneymaker. Whereas like we grew up on so many different shows that were just that I don't know, they weren't really trying to hit any demographic. It was just kind of
Mm-hmm.
strange stories that were fun. And you
Yeah.
can interviewed a lot of people here on it, like the Jonan Vasquez or like uh
Yeah.
Yeah.
the Craig McCracken stuff or just there's a lot of just shows where things were being made and like now it's a staple, but back then it wasn't. It was just like, yeah, this is a fun show. I love this show. So I
Mm-hmm.
just there's not as much that of that being made right now, especially like even with Cartoon Network being kind of shelved a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like there's a little bit of a lack of risks. Or if they do have risks, they don't stay around. But this is the conversation we've always had with everyone in the industry. So, uh,
Yeah. That it
It
is
always comes
very
back.
it's a
oh wait,
very
we
real
have to
conversation.
have this. It's actually
Yeah.
requirements. When you get into the guild, they have you sign it. Make sure to talk about this now. I love this guy. Your apes are so good, Ian.
Oh,
I gotta say.
people care that I draw. If I post anything other than an ape on social media, nobody gives a shit.
Uh-oh. I feel like I've had that conversation with Rebecca Kirby on the show where she was like, all the all my audience wants to see is buff women with big boobs. It's like each of us we have like that one thing.
I have other things I want to draw. Okay.
What would you say is your thing, Jackson? Your main one thing?
Oh, I don't have an audience, so barely anything. Probably my little characters that I do. That's my thing.
Your nib little guy?
Yeah, I used to do possums, and people seem to respond pretty well to those. But I just kind of was like, yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm chasing people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah,
Well,
Well,
whatever feels good, That's what I say. If it feels good to draw an ape, it feels good to draw. Uh, what about you, V? What's your thing?
every time I started to get a thing, I stopped doing it. And I think that's why I don't for the longest time.
yeah, it's
I
it's
didn't
very much
grow.
that.
Yeah, I didn't grow a big audience for a long time because I was just like, I mean, there was like a moment when I had my inks with like that were like extremely popular with people getting tattoos, and it was
Oh
like these
yeah,
little like
I remember those.
magical fantasy guys and goblins. I had a moment when people were really into my goblins, and then I was like, then you'll never see them ever again.
Yeah.
You want this? Well, you can't have it.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, you know what else we can't have, unfortunately? It's a podcast
Oh,
episode that lasts more
I'm
than two
sorry. I'm
hours.
sorry. I have to go. It's my fault.
It's
It's
Ian's
my.
fault. Everybody in the comments,
You can
chastise
you can be
Ian.
mad at me.
Tell
You can
him.
find me at Ian_laser on Instagram. DM me. I'll look at all of them. No, I won't. But
everybody type in the comments how much you resent Ian for cutting the podcast short. No, I'm joking. Don't do that.
That was fast.
No, but this was a good one. I think we had a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, Jackson, that's the end of this creative block. Thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
It'd be blah 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 blah. And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on social media at CRTV Block, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guest. Huge thanks to our editor Clements, love you Clements, for editing the podcast. Marco, one of the greats, for helping us produce the show, and Ibuka for creating. You're also awesome, Ibuka, for creating the short clips we've been putting out.
If you love our show, you can support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews and access to our Discord community. Click the link in the description of this episode to follow Jackson on all his socials and to find our Patreon. Another great way you can support the podcast if you are not ready to commit financially is to comment, like, subscribe, all these great things.
Share the links. All that.
I've been your host, VEE.
And I've been your guest host, Ian. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.